optimal economic decisions. And more importantly, you should be able to relate theoretical concepts to contemporary economic issues, such as budgeting, resource allocation in government, firm production strategies, and so on and so forth. And lastly, you should be able to critically assess policy choices in the light of scarcity and opportunity costs. Example includes issues like subsidy removal, education versus defense spending, public versus private investment. And you should be able to develop rational and evidence-based reasoning in approaching economic problems. To cap it up, you should be able to cultivate an appreciation for efficient use of scarce resources, sustainability, and welfare-oriented decision-making. Now, let's move to the substantive issue. Definition and scope of economics. Now, what exactly are we expected to understand under this particular subheading? Definition and scope of economics. Here we want to take a look at the evolution of definitions of economics. The definition of economics has undergone several transformations over centuries. And these transitions reflect changes in economic reality, intellectual traditions, and analytical emphasis. We want to begin with the classical definition, which I call wealth-oriented. Wealth-oriented, classical definitions. Foremost on the list of the classicalist is Adam Smith. Adam Smith is a renowned economist. He defined economics as the study of the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. Let me repeat that again. Adam Smith, 1776, defined economics as the study of the nature and causes of the wealth of nations. Here, what you need to know here is that his focus is on these three things I'm about to mention. His focus is on these three things I'm about to mention. 1, production of wealth. 2, distribution of wealth. And 3, growth of national output. So the main limitation of his definition is that it gives undue emphasis to material wealth and neglect human welfare. It gives undue emphasis to material wealth and neglect human welfare. We also have neoclassical definitions. Neoclassical definitions. Neoclassical definitions, they are also part of the classicals. They are also called, their own definition as well is welfare-oriented. On the list of the neoclassical economists, we have a renowned economist called Alfred Marshall. Alfred Marshall, that is 1890, redefined economics as a study of mankind in the ordinary business of life, emphasizing welfare rather than wealth. So Marshall introduced key concepts such as marginal utility, demand and supply, and consumer demand and supply and consumer surplus. What is the limitation of his own definition is that is measuring welfare in a subjective manner. In a subjective manner. We also have Robinson, Leonard Robinson, that is 1932. He provided the most widely accepted modern definition. So how did he define economics? Leonard Robbins defined economics as a science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. The key point in his own definitions as follows. Human wants are unlimited. That's number one. Resources, that is the means, are scarce. And again, in his own definition, what is also clear in his own definition is that resources have alternative uses. And lastly, that economic decisions involve choice. This definition that is given by Leonard Robbins is universal because it is applied across market structure, culture, and level of development. It's universal. I'm still on the first point on the slide, which is explain definitions and scope of economics. The modern perspective is the definition given by Samuelson and Nordhaus. Samuelson and Nordhaus, their own emphasis, they are contemporary economists. Samuelson and Nordhaus, they are contemporary economists, but their own emphasis in their own definitions is that they emphasize allocation of scarce resources, they emphasize efficient production, they emphasize equal distribution, and they emphasize economic stability and growth. So modern economics is thus both a positive science, that is explaining facts, and they are a normative science, prescribing policy. Now, I want to take a look at, I've finished explaining definitions. I now want to move on to scope of economics. So what is the scope of economics? Scope of economics. Scope of economics, I want to take a look at it from two major broad perspectives. No, four major broad perspectives. I want to take a look at it from the two branches of economy, which is micro and macro. I also take a look at it from normative positive divide, as well as applied economics. Let me begin with the first one, microeconomics. Microeconomics, of course, economy is divided into two broad categories, microeconomics and macroeconomics. So what is microeconomics? Microeconomics studies the behavior of individual decision-making units, such as households, firms, and industry groups. Major concern of these microeconomics include consumer behavior and utility maximization, production and cost functions, market structures such as perfect competition, monopoly, oligopoly, duopoly, etc. And their price strategies. And also, is also concerned with what we call welfare analysis and efficiency. So microeconomics uses tools such as indifference curves, isoquants, optimizations, calculus, and general equilibrium theory. What about the second branch of economics? Macroeconomics. Macroeconomics examine the behavior of the economy as a whole. The key variable in macroeconomics includes national income, unemployment, inflation, economic growth, monetary and fiscal policies, international trade and finance. The way I want to take a look at these two branches of economy is that if you look at micro, focuses on trees. Let's assume microeconomy focuses on trees, just only trees. But macroeconomics focuses on the forest. You can see the difference between the two. One focuses on trees, the other one focuses on the forest. What about the normative positive divide? The normative economics and positive economics. The normative positive divide. What do we mean by that? I'm talking about the positive economics and normative economics. Positive economy describes what is. What is. Example is to say that a rise in exchange rate increases import costs. A rise in exchange rate increases import costs. That is, whenever there's an increase in exchange rate, it's going to lead to increase in the importation costs. That is example of positive economy. It describes what is. What about normative economics? Normative economy discusses what ought to be, what should be. Example, government should stabilize exchange rate to protect consumer. Government should. That is ought to be normative. Government should stabilize exchange rate to protect consumer. Both are essential, of course. Positive economy provides facts. Normative analysis guides policy. Guides policies. Another aspect of scope of economy that I want to talk about is what we call applied economics. How do we apply the knowledge of microeconomics? It can be applied in development economics. We also have what we call health and educational economics. We also have what we call environmental and resource economics. We also have labor economics. We have transport and urban economics. These are areas that economic science can be applied. So applied economic science translates theory into practical solutions for real-world challenges. Now, moving on to the basic economic problem. Moving on to the basic economic problem. The basic economic problem. I want to take a look at basic economic problem from the perspective of scarcity and choice. The concept of scarcity is the foundational economic problem that arises because resources are finite and human wants are infinite. It means resources are limited, but human wants are unlimited. So it then means that because of that, resources have alternative uses. Example, let's talk about land. Land is limited. It can be used for agriculture, factory, housing, and so on and so forth. Time is also limited. A student cannot attend 2 classes simultaneously. Government revenue is limited. Spending on health means less for defense and education. If government decides to spend on health, that means less resources will be available for defense and education. So what are the characteristics of scarcity? The characteristic of scarcity is that it is universal. Take note of that. It is universal. It means it is experienced by all society, rich and poor. It is relative. That is not absolute shortage. It is relative. What is scarce to you may not be scarce to another person. It's relative. It is relative. And it necessitates choice and trade-offs. So, what is the need for choice? What is the need for choice? What is the need for choice? Because no society can produce all goods and services individual wants. Choices must be made. Society cannot produce everything that human being wants. And no society can produce all goods and services individual wants. As such, choices must be made. So economic agent must answer this following question, the 3 fundamental questions. What to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. So what do you mean by what to produce? Example is to say that, should Nigeria produce more refined petroleum or invest in agriculture? Should Nigeria produce more refined petroleum or invest in agriculture? 2, how to produce. Should we use labor or capital? That is, should the production be labor intensive or capital intensive techniques? And for whom to produce? Should output be distributed through markets or through subsidy or rationing? But what I want to say lastly on this particular slide is that different economic systems, be it market, command, or mixed, answer this question differently. Be it different economic system answer this question, these 3 questions differently. What to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Now, I want to talk about economic agents. Who are the economic agents? Basically, there are 3 of them. We have consumers, firms, and government. So let's talk about consumer first. Consumer is also synonymous with households. Consumers are the ultimate owners of factors of production. They are the ultimate owners of factors of production, that they own factors of production. So their key roles include supplying labor, capital, entrepreneurship, demanding goods and services. They are the ones that supply labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And the goods that are being produced, they also demand for it. So demanding goods and services is another role of consumer. And they making choices that maximize utility. That is an important role of consumer, utility maximization. They making choices in order to maximize utility. And consumer often engage in rationality assumption. What do I mean by that? Consumer choose bundles of goods that gives them the highest possible satisfaction, subject to their budget constraints. Example of consumer decisions include choosing between savings and consumption, or selecting cheaper substitutes when price rises or when prices rise, and allocating monthly income between food, rent, and transport. These are all examples of consumer decisions. What about firms, producers? Firm converts inputs into outputs. Their primary objective is profit maximization. That is a primary objective, profit maximization. What about their decisions? How do they make decisions? Decisions that are being made by firms include how much to produce, which production techniques to adopt, which combination of labor and capital to use, and whether to enter or exit a market. Whether to enter or exit a market. So firms operate under different market conditions that influence their pricing power. Yes, we're going to talk about that maybe, in the course of the lecture. Maybe another lecturer is going to take you on that when you're talking about market structure. Firms operate under various market conditions that influence their pricing power. And lastly is government, which is another important economic agent. We call them, we also refer to it as public sector. The government play a central role in economic coordination. The functions of government in any economy includes provision of public goods, such as policing, sanitation, roads, build roads, bridges, and so on and so forth. Provision of public goods. 2, regulation of market failures. They regulate market failure. In what way? By controlling monopolies, regulating pollutions, and protecting consumers. So regulation of market failures is another function of government. Government also have this function to perform redistribution of income, even though that does not happen in our context in Nigeria. But that is another important role of government, redistribution of income. Government should redistribute income through taxation and welfare programs. Another function of government is stabilization of the economy. How can government stabilize the economy? Government can stabilize the economy using fiscal tools like fiscal policy and monetary policies. And lastly, but not the least, is that government also promotes long-term development. Government can invest in education, government can invest in research, government can invest in infrastructure. So government acts as both economic participants and referees, ensuring fair play. So to wrap it up, under this particular slide, the interaction among these 3 agents, consumers, firms, government, shapes resource allocations. Shapes resource allocation. Now, I want to talk about the opportunity cost, the concept of opportunity cost. Let me combine to say opportunity cost and trade-offs. Yes. They mean, let's take them one after the other. The opportunity cost and trade-off. The opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative forgone. That is how it is defined, technically speaking. Opportunity cost can be defined as the next best alternative forgone. It is not the monetary cost alone. It is what one sacrifices. Take note of that. It is not monetary cost alone. It is what one sacrifices. Example, for instance, a student who attends class forgoes part-time salary. A student who attends class forgo part-time salary. And if government builds a power plant, it sacrifices a possible investment in maybe hospitals. If government decides to build a power plant, it then means it's sacrificing a possible investment in hospitals. And if a firm choosing labor-intensive production, it then means it's foregoing capital-intensive modern production. So you can see that that is what we call the value of the next best alternative forgone. So opportunity cost guides what I will call rational economic decisions. Rational economic decisions. Rational economic decisions. I want to talk about trade-offs. Trade-offs. This trade-off, I want to take a look at trade-offs. Trade-offs, I want to talk about it using this graph. Production possibility frontier. Trade-offs occurs whenever a choice between competing alternatives must be made. Whenever there is need for you to make a choice between competing alternatives, the trade-offs, is going to take place. Example is a consumer choosing between data subscription and a new clothing. You can see, or a factory reducing pollution may increase production costs. Or choosing to save more today means consuming less today. If you choose to save more today, that means you are going to consume less today. So you are trading off. That's what we call trade-off. You are losing at one end, you are gaining at the other end. So trade-off makes decision-making unavoidable. And it's very central to economics. It's very central to to economics. So production possibility frontier, which we are seeing on this slide, that is exactly what it depicts. It's talking about trade-off. So PPF, which is production possibility frontier, graphically illustrate trade-offs and opportunity costs. So what are the features of this PP curve? What are the key features of this curve? Is that downward sloping. If you take a look at it, it's downward sloping. It means more of one good requires giving up another. If you want to move from 10, take a look at the y-axis, good y, which is on the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis, good x. If somebody wants to move from 10, production of 10 to 12, you want to get 2 units of good y, what is going to happen to good x? That means that decision of moving from 12 to 10 to 12 will have reduced your consumption from 8 to 6. You can see that there's a trade-off there. You are gaining at the point of what? Consuming more of Y, and you are losing your consumption of X. So there's a trade-off there. So that is exactly what it illustrates. More of one good requires giving up another. And again, bold outward. If you look at this particular curve, it bolds outward. What does that reflect? It's reflecting increasing opportunity cost. Increasing opportunity cost. So inside this curve now are inefficient points. Inside this curve, it's inefficient. If you are operating inside this curve, it's inefficient. But if you are operating on the curve, you are efficient. You are operating at efficient points. But what if you are operating outside this curve? That is unattainable with current resources that you have. It's unattainable. It's also possible this PP curve, it can actually shift outward. What is going to make it to shift outward is technological progress or increase in resources. If there are increases in resources or technological progress, this curve is going to shift outward. But what is going to make this production possibility curve to shift inward? It's going to shift inward if there are wars, if a country is experiencing war or natural disaster or economic recession, that is what can make this particular curve to shift inwardly. Now, the important thing I wanted to know here is that there's a marginal decision making if you are looking at this particular curve. Rational economy could rely on marginal analysis, what we call marginal benefits and marginal cost. So a choice is optimal when marginal benefits is equal marginal cost. And that occurs at that point where if you are moving from 10 to 12, that means you are gaining at that point and you are losing at this point. You can see that the marginal benefit of Y is equal to what? The marginal cost of X. So a choice is made, is optimal when your marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. This helps to explain consumer demand behavior, profit maximization, and optimal government policies. Now, conclusively, we've been able to talked about the scope and the nature of economic science. And of course, everything that we have said so far centers around an important concept, which is the concept of what? Scarcity and rational choice. If we have everything in abundance, if you have everything in abundance, there won't be any need for us to study economics because our resources are scarce. That inform that course called economics, economic science, because resources are scarce, and economy is in everything that we do in life. So economy is about scarcity. Because of this scarcity that we experience in our daily lives, there is need for us to make what? There is need for us to make a choice. So economic science is built on the fundamental reality of scarcity, which forces individuals, firms, and government to make choices. So the study of economics provides a systematic way to analyze these choices, understand trade-offs, evaluate opportunity costs. So by examining the behavior of consumer, producer, and government, economics helps explain how resources are allocated and how welfare is affected. So this course, of course, these are foundational concepts that prepares you for more advanced microeconomics theory, where mathematical tools, models are applied to analyze decision-making more rigorously. That ends our topic 1. That ends our topic 1. That ends our topic 1. So I would like to move very quickly to topic 2. I would like to move very quickly to topic 2. Do you have any question for me? Do you have any question for me?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, ask.
Okay. What's the difference between opportunity cost and trade-off?
They mean the same thing.
They're the same.
Yes, technically. In fact, for me, they are just the same concept. If you are talking about opportunity cost, you are talking about trade-off.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the graph you were showing is
Yes,
the same as production possibility curve.
yes,
It's the same thing.
yes. Production
Okay,
possibility
sir.
curve or possibility frontier
Okay.
means the same
Okay.
thing. Yes, thank you.
Okay, sir.
Any other
That's
question? Any other
Good
question?
afternoon, sir.
Yes,
Good
good
afternoon,
afternoon.
sir.
Good afternoon.
All right, sir. Sir, can you kindly come again with the definition of neoclassical definition of economics by Alfred Marshall?
You know what? Don't bother yourself. I'm going to give you my material as soon as we finish the class. You will see it there. Is that taken?
Okay, thank you, sir.
So don't need to bother. Is that clear? I'm going to make
Yes,
my
sir.
material available as soon as we end the class. I'm going to make the material available. Is that clear?
Thank you, sir.
That's
Yes, sir.
okay.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
sir.
That's okay. Any other question for us before we proceed to topic 2? Okay. In the absence of, don't have to waste most of our time. Let's settle down on the second topic. So, so now the second topic is very, very important as well in economics. Very, very critical. It's a concept of methodology. Methodology of economics. So before I talk about the methodology of economics, what are the learning outcomes at the end of this exercise? Methodology of economics. The learning outcome is as follows. But before I talk about the learning outcomes, let me say something briefly about methodology of economics. Methodology of economics simply means or refers to the set of principles, techniques, analytical approaches that economics use to understand how individual firms and government behave and how economic system functions. So, as a social science, economics relies on systematic reasoning, factual evidence, deductive and inductive logic, and formal modeling to explain and predict economic phenomena. That is what economic science is all about. Economic science relies on systematic reasoning, not just subjective way of reasoning. It's highly systematic reasoning, factual evidence, give you some facts, numerical facts to support whatever we are saying, deductive and inductive logic, as well as we model in order to explain and predict economic phenomena. So this lecture is going to explore 4 fundamental components of economic methodology. This particular, session topic is going to explore the distinction between positive and normative economics, even though we've mentioned it briefly in our first lecture. We are going to expatiate on it further. Distinction between positive and normative economics, the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics, and the role of assumptions in economic modeling. In economics, they call us assumption people. Oh, assumption, everything. Oh, given X is X, affects Y. Every other thing is held constant. That is assumption. So the role of assumption, the role it plays in economic modeling. As again, the major analytical tools used by economists. What are the tools? We often make use of graphs, mathematics, and some empirical tools. So these are things that methodology of economy really want to tell us. So the learning outcomes, just like I've said, is that by the end of this lecture, you should be able to clearly differentiate distinguish between positive and normative statements in economics. Again, you should be able to differentiate between macroeconomics and macroeconomic analysis with appropriate examples. And at the end of this exercise, again, you should be able to explain why economists use assumptions and how different types of assumption influence models. Different types of assumption, how do they influence our models? And lastly, you should be able to identify and interpret the major tools of economic analysis, including diagrams, that is graphs, mathematical models, and empirical techniques. So at the end of this exercise, those are things that you should be able to know. So now, to the substantive issue. Let's talk about the first one, positive economics. Positive economics. Positive economics deals with the statements that describe, explain, and predict economic phenomena. That is what we call what is. What is? Positive economy deals with the statement that describe, explain, and predict economic phenomena. These statements are factual, objective, and testable. Yes. What is? They are factual, fact-based, testable statement and objective. What are the examples of this? Example is to say a rise in interest rate reduces investment spending. You can see that it's a factual statement. It's objective statement. It's an objective statement to say a rise in interest rate reduces investment spending, or to say that Nigeria's inflation rate increased to 27% in 2025, or to say higher prices reduce country demanded. These are all fact-based, objective, and testable statements. So what are the characteristics of positive economics? Characteristics is that it is based on cause and effect relationship. If this happens, this is going to, if this affects this, and this is what's going to happen. It can be tested with fact, with data. It can be tested with data. This is another characteristic of positive economy. It can be tested with data. And it lies at the core of economic science because it is positive economics. It deals with objectivity. So it lies at the core of economic science. So positive economics, therefore, form the basis for empirical research and theoretical development. It formed the basis for empirical research and theoretical development. Now, the second segment of this discussion is normative economics. Look at the word normative. Normative economics involves value judgments about what the economy should be like. Value judgment, what the economy should be, what ought to be. This statement are subjective and not testable. You can't test it. It's not factual. It's not objective. It's highly subjective. Example of that is to say government should increase spending on education. Government should increase spending on education. Or to say that the minimum wage should be raised to improve living standard. The minimum wage should be raised to improve living standard. Or to say income inequality must be reduced. So what are the characteristics of these normative economies? One, it is being influenced by moral and political beliefs. It can be influenced by moral and political beliefs. It cannot be proven right or wrong by data. It cannot be proven right or wrong by data. It plays a critical role in policy debates. Most of the policy debate that you see on TV, they are based on normative economics. Government should increase this, government should do that, government should, these are all normative issues. So what is the relationship between the two? The relationship between both is that positive analysis provides facts and predictions. Normative analysis uses values and judgment to make policy recommendations. And effective policy making requires both. If you want to make effective policy making, you need both. You need both positive as well as the normative. You need both for you to be able to make effective policy making. Now, another important aspect that I want to talk about is microeconomics and macroeconomics. What is microeconomics? Microeconomics focuses on individual decision making, such as household, firms, government, and so on. So there are some topics that microeconomic covers. If you have a topic like demand and supply, consumer behavior, production and cost, market structure, welfare and efficiency, these are all micro level example. These are all microeconomics, example. So how many units of electricity should a household consume? How many units of goods should I buy? These are all micro level example. So microeconomics help explain resource allocation and pricing at the individual market level. Take note of that. At individual market level. It just explains resource allocation and pricing at individual market level. Now, I want to talk about macro. On the other hand, macroeconomics focuses on aggregates, economic variables, such as national income, that is GDP, inflation, unemployment, interest rates, economic growth, balance of payments, fiscal and monetary policy, and etc. These are all macro issues. So look at the word macro, study aggregates. So example of macro level example is to say that how does a fall in oil prices affect Nigerian GDP? How does a fall in oil prices affects Nigerian GDP? So macroeconomics provide tools for managing the overall performance and stability of the economy. So what's the relationship between the two? What's the relationship between these two? Macroeconomics behavior form the foundation of microeconomic outcomes. Let me repeat that again. Microeconomics behavior forms the foundation of macroeconomic outcome. Example of that is to say that Nigeria is bad because we citizens of Nigeria we are bad. If we want Nigerians to be good, we also have to change all our attitude. So we are the one that makes Nigeria, myself, yourself, we are the unit, micro units that form the entire country. So if we are good today, the entire country will be good. So that is the principle. It's micro, macro. Nigerian is bad. We all say Nigerian is bad. Nigerian is this. Because the units within Nigeria, they are also bad. So macroeconomic behavior form the foundation of macroeconomic outcomes. Macroeconomic variable influence macroeconomic decision. Can I say it again? Macroeconomic variables influence micro level decisions. If government if Nigerian government takes or make any decisions now, take any decision, it's going to affect all of us. You can see that we are moving from MI to MA. We are now moving from MA to MI, back to MI. So macro variables influence micro level decisions. So these two fields are interdependent. They are interdependent. If government makes a decision today, economic decision, either political or economic decision, it's going to affect all of us. So that is an example of that we are interdependent. Now, I want to talk about an important aspect, role of assumptions. Roles of assumptions. Role of assumptions. Why do economists use assumption? Economists, why do we use assumption? Why do economists economists use assumption. Economic models simplify complex real-world interactions. And because of that, in order to simplify complex real-world interactions, then we need to make assumptions. And assumption helps to focus on essential variables. Assumption also helps to make model mathematically tractable. And it also helps expose core economic relationships. And it helps to ensure clarity and precisions. It helps to ensure clarity and precisions. Without assumptions, economic analysis will be impossible due to the complexity of human behavior. Because of that, we need to make assumptions. Let me give an example. Price quantity demanded is being influenced by so many variables: population, price, income, technology, just name it. But you can see that so many things can affect our quantity demanded of a product. Because for us to be able to track, to be able to manage this complexity, we need to make an assumption. That is why I said in economics that quantity demanded now is just being affected by price, holding other factor constant, ceteris paribus, meaning that we are holding every other thing constant, believing that the only thing that is driving the quantity demanded is what? Is the price. If you are making such an assumption, you have made an assumption there, saying that the only thing that drives the price of a product or quantity demanded of a product is the price. It means that we are holding every other variable constant. That is an example of what you have said. So the role of assumption is help us to focus on essential variables. It also makes our model to be mathematically tractable, and it exposes core economic relationship, and it equally ensures clarity and precision. So, and this is important because without assumption, economic analysis will be impossible. Due to what? Due to the complexity of human behavior. Now, we have different types of assumption. We have different types of assumption. We have what we call simplifying assumptions. We also have behavioral assumptions. And we have what we call technical assumptions. Now, what is behavioral assumptions? Behavioral assumption is when we often use behavioral assumptions to make model easier to understand and solve. That is when we use simplifying assumption. We use it to make our model easier to understand and to be able to solve the model. Example is to say consumer are rational. It's a very simplifying assumption. Consumer can be irrational. Example of that is to say that whenever there's an increase in the price, quantity demanded will do what? Will fall. But it's also possible that whenever there's an increase in the price, quantity demanded will what? Will increase. And whenever there is an increase, fall in the price, we expect the quantity demanded to what? To rise. Quantity demanded will fall. These are irrational way of behaving. So, but for simplicity, we say consumers are rational. We use this to make our model to be, easier to understand and to be able to solve it. That is why we make a very simplifying assumption to say consumers are rational. Consumer can as well be irrational. But before we want to simplify our assumption, we said consumers are rational behavior, rational being, rational economic being. It can be. So another one to say that firms aims to maximize profits. These are all simplifying assumptions. Or to say markets are perfectly competitive. Market can be perfectly incompetitive. But we make this assumption in order to make our model easier to understand and so solve. So these assumptions abstract from reality to focus on core mechanisms. That is simplifying assumption. What about behavioral assumptions? This describes how economic agent behaves. Look at the word behavioral assumptions. It describes how economic agents behave. Example, People respond to incentives. Consumers prefer more to less. These are behavioral assumptions. Firms seek cost minimization. These are behavioral assumptions. Such assumptions form the foundation of macroeconomics theory. The third one is technical assumption. This relates to the structure of our model. This assumption relates more to the structure of our model. Example, to say utility are convex. These are technical assumptions. Utility functions are convex. Costs increase at an increasing rate. Production costs are continuous and differentiable. These are all, these are all technical way of, making assumptions in economics. Now, we want to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of assumption. What are the strengths and weaknesses of assumption? What are strengths and weaknesses of assumption? The strength of assumption is that one of the strengths of assumption is that it helps promote clarity. That's number one. It helps promote clarity. Two, it helps in deriving prediction. It helps in deriving prediction. Three, it allows for model testing. If there's need for us to test our model, these are the strengths of assumption. And it makes complex phenomena analyzable. If you want to analyze a very complex phenomenon, then we need assumptions to do that. So these are strengths of assumptions. Number one is it promotes clarity. It promotes clarity. Number two is that it helps in deriving prediction. It aids in deriving predictions. If there is need for us to make some predictions, then we need to make some assumptions. Again, it allows for model testing. If there is need for us to test our model, we need assumptions to be able to do that. And it makes complex phenomena analyzable. Very complex phenomena can be analyzed using some concepts. And most of what we do in economics, of course, we can't do away without making assumptions in economics. And the examples are bound. For instance, if you look at what I've said about demand the other time, if you take a look at the graph of demand curve, you can see that it's a two-dimensional curve, plane, whereby you have your x and y axis. What is in your y axis is the price. Why your x-axis has a quantity. By the time you have your diagram drawn, you have a downward sloping demand curve. And if you have a downward sloping demand curve, what it simply tells you is that whenever there's an increase in the price, quantity demanded falls, and whenever there's a fall in the price, quantity demanded, will rise. Now, we're able to come to this conclusion because we have simplified the complexity. What do we simplify in this context is that we've been able to assume away other factors that can as well affect our quantity demanded. To say that the only thing that drives our price, quantity demanded, is the price, while other factors are assumed to be what? To be constant. These are just simplified assumptions, just to make the complex phenomenon analyzable. So now, what are the weaknesses for making assumptions? What are the weaknesses? One, it may oversimplify reality. Just like we said, just like what we said about our demand. Just like what we said about our demand. To say that the only thing that drives the price, that drives the quantity demanded, is the price. It's an oversimplified assumption. Our demand can be affected by several factors simultaneously. But to say that the only thing that drives it is the price is oversimplifying assumption. So that is one of the weaknesses of assumption. It oversimplifies realities. Two, it can lead to unrealistic predictions. Yes. If there's because we said it helps in deriving predictions, it can lead to unrealistic predictions because when you oversimplify your assumptions, you end up making unrealistic predictions. So that is another weaknesses of assumptions, and it requires empirical validation. Even if you make all these assumptions, we still need to, you know, validate it empirically, carry out some empirical tests to see whether those assumptions are good or they are bad assumptions. So, but nevertheless, assumption remains central to economic methodology. Whether we like it or not, we still rely so much on assumption. So that is on weak strengths and weaknesses of assumption. Now, I want to talk about tools of economic analysis. In economics, we use several tools to achieve our goal and our objectives. And for us to, the major tools that we use in economy are what we are seeing on this slide. We use graphical tools, we use mathematical tools, and we use empirical tools like econometrics, data analysis, and so on and so forth. But let's take it one after the other. Graphical tools. Graphical tools, that is when we use graph to analyze our phenomena, economic phenomena. So graphs helps visualize relationship such as demand and supply. It helps visualize relationships such as demand and supply, cost function, indifference curves, production possibility frontier, equilibrium conditions, and so on and so forth. So it helps visualize relationship. So what are the advantages of graphical tools? One, it's intuitive and easy to interpret. It's intuitive and very easy to interpret. Two, it is ideal for illustrating marginal relationship. It is ideal when we want to analyze marginal relationship. And of course, it is useful for classroom analysis as well. When we want to do some classroom analysis, we can use graphs to do some of those things. So these are, advantages one can get if one uses graphical tools. This second one is mathematical tools. Formal mathematical techniques helps to simplify or specify and solve economic problem. Mathematics is very powerful. People use mathematics to solve world problems. Most of the problems that we are facing in the world today, the solutions are mostly derived by mathematicians. You can use mathematics to solve economic problem. So formal mathematical techniques help specify and solve economic problem. Example is of mathematical tool is when you use functions like utility, production cost, or when we use equilibrium condition, when we use derivative like differentiation, integration. These are mathematical tools. When we use the derivative for marginal analysis, the YDS, that is derivative for marginal analysis, the YDS. Optimization, like when you want to maximize utility, you want to minimize cost. These are, we can use mathematics to, to achieve our goal of optimization. We also have what we call simultaneous equation. So these are various ways in which we can use mathematics to resolve economic problem. So mathematics make economic analysis precise and internally consistent. Take note of that. Mathematics makes economic analysis precise and internally consistent. The last one on my slide is empirical econometric model. This is very advanced one that you will use when you are pursuing after your BSc, you want to come for your master's and PhD. That is when you will need this, particular tools. empirical models, empirical methods. Empirical tools involve collecting and analyzing data to test economic theories and inform policy. If there is need for you to test some economic theories, you need to collect some data, analyze the data to see whether those theories are valid or they are not. So you use empirical tools. So the key methods, the methods of empirical tools is to say if is correlation and causation analysis. If you want to use empirical method, the key methods here is when you use correlation and causation analysis, regression models like OLS, panel, instrumental variable, or you are using forecasting models as well as hypothesis testing. These are methods that can be used under empirical method. So the application of that is if you want to determine the effect of exchange rate on inflation, of course you will use empirical method. Or if you want to estimate demand elasticity, or you want to evaluate employment policies, you can use empirical method to achieve that. So empirical methods connect theories with real world evidence. It connects theory with real world evidence. So economic conclusively, economic methodology encompasses the full range of tools, principles, and techniques that economists use to study economic behavior. And they explain the real world outcomes. So the distinction between positive and negative statement guides scientific analysis and policy debates. While microeconomics and macroeconomics together provide a complete picture of individual and their aggregate behavior. Assumptions enable this construction, enables assumptions enable the construction of theoretical models, while graphical, mathematical, and empirical tools provide us with framework for analyzing and validating economics theory. So together, these methodological pillars define the scientific character of modern economics. Together, all these things that we have said about positive and normative, micro and macro assumptions, mathematical models, and the rest, together they form methodological pillars that define the scientific character of modern economic science. On this note, I think we have ended the second topic. So you are free, just feel free to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions. Ask me questions. Feel free. Feel free to ask questions, please. Is there no question for me? Feel free to ask question, please.
Okay, so my question is concerning this, the two
In the absence of no question, thank you so much. I'll end my class.